This video is an audio recording of our reading group reading and discussing on the correct handling of contradictions among the people. Chapter 1. Two Types of Contradictions Differing in Nature. Our reading groups are open to the public and we encourage discussion of any ideas people bring to the table, but this also means some of the ideas expressed in this discussion might not reflect the actual views of our party on any level. I would also like to note, because this will likely be the first public video on our YouTube channel, we have been holding reading groups for a while now. On the Correct Handling Contradictions Among the People just happens to be the book we're on now that we are ready to be making public videos of our reading groups. While we will always do our best to make every reading group as accessible to a general audience as it can be given the content, if you are new to Marxism and trying to figure out where to start, we recommend checking out the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels and The State and Revolution by Vladimir Lenin. With all that out of the way, we hope you enjoy this reading and discussion of On the Correct Handling Contradictions Among the People, Chapter 1, Two Types of Contradictions Differing in Nature. So welcome to our first session of our reading group covering On the Correct Handling of Contradictions Among the People by Mao Zedong. We're going to be covering Chapter 1 first, Two Types of Contradictions Differing in Nature. This is the longest section in the book, and it's probably a third of the entire thing. So do have it broken up, and I'll be asking a discussion question at different points throughout the reading. Is there any volunteers on who would like to read first?
I would.
All right, you can begin.
Okay. Our general subject is the correct handling of contradictions among the people. For convenience, let us discuss it under 12 subheadings. Although reference will be made to contradictions between ourselves and the enemy, this discussion will center on contradictions among the people. Number 1, two types of contradictions differing in nature. Never before has our country been as united as it is today. The victories of the bourgeois democratic revolution and of the socialist revolution, and our achievements in socialist construction have rapidly changed the face of the old China. A still brighter future lies ahead for our motherland. The days of national disunity and chaos, which the people detested, are gone, never to return. Led by the working class and the Communist Party, our 600 million people, united as one, are engaged in the great task of building socialism. The unification of our country, the unity of our people, and the unity of our various nationalities. These are basic guarantees for the sure triumph of our cause. However, this does not mean that contradictions no longer exist in our society. To imagine that none exist is a naive idea which is at variance with objective reality. We are confronted with two types of social contradictions, those between ourselves and the enemy, and those among the people, and the two are totally different in nature. To understand these two different types of contradictions correctly, we must first be clear on what is meant by the people and what is meant by the enemy. The concept of the people varies in content in different countries and in different periods of history in a given country. Take our own country, for example. During the War of Resistance against Japan, all those classes, strata, and social groups opposing Japanese aggression came within the category of the people, while the Japanese imperialists, their Chinese collaborators, and the pro-Japanese elements were all enemies of the people. During the War of Liberation, the US imperialists and their running dogs, the bureaucrat capitalists, the landlords, and the Kuomintang reactionaries, who represented these two classes, were the enemies of the people, while the other classes, strata, and social groups which opposed them all came within the category of the people. At the present stage, the period of building socialism, the classes, strata, and social groups which favor, support, and work for the cause of socialist construction all come within the category of the people, while the social forces and groups which resist the socialist revolution and are hostile to or sabotage socialist construction are all enemies of the people.
All right, thank you. First question here. How does Mao define the people here? How is this different from the way that we saw Marx, Lenin, and Engels use the term the people when we were reading The State and Revolution?
Rather than defining the people as a specific class, like the peasantry, Mao kind of implies that the people are the peasantry, but the people of the peasantry that ideologically are aligned with socialist ideals and kind of freeing China from outside influence.
Not quite. Think bigger picture.
Rats.
Anyone? Just as a reminder, when we were reading The State and Revolution, when Marx, Lenin, and Engels were using the term the people, uh, they were referring to the entire population. Um, in that sense, uh, throughout the text, they reference a people's government that they or a people's state that they criticize the use of the term for. However, they were using a different definition for the word people um, for that criticism. Mao uses it in a different way in which it does make sense to say a people's state.
I think whereas before Marx and Engels would define, you know, social groups in terms of their relation to the means of production, and I think Lenin obviously supported uh, that definition as well.
Hmm.
It looks like what Mao is talking about here is not so much a direct relation to the means of production, but like the relation to the ideologies of to the ideology of capitalism. Like he says, you got the bourgeois, the bureaucrat capitalists, the landlords, the Kuomintang, the reactionaries, um, and then you have the pretty much everyone else, everyone who opposed them, he's calling the people. Um, and I think what's interesting here is like, like Lenin came from a petty bureaucratic, technically, I think it was an aristocratic title. He came from a petty aristocratic family in Russia, which, if you look at the Marx and Engels definition, would mean that, okay, well, he's part of the ruling class then. But he abandoned that in order to pursue revolutionary politics and Marxism and develop his own Leninism. So I think what's interesting about Mao's definition here is like technically you could be a landlord and yet recognize that your position in society is detrimental to the majority and therefore fight on the side of the people, regardless of your actual class position in society. So it's more, I don't know, it seems to me like what Mao was saying more is, are you on the side of the majority liberation? Are you on the side that is against, the feudal holdovers and the imperialists, and the capitalists and all that stuff?
Hmm.
If you're against them, then you are the people.
Sure. Yeah. Um, just in general, I define that as saying that Mao describes the people as the masses of the population that have a common cause for the betterment of the vast majority of society. And like, of course, Mao doesn't ignore class. Like he says, at the present stage, the period of building socialism, the classes, strata, and social groups which favor, support, and work for the cause of the socialist construction all come within the category of the people. So class does play a role in this. But yeah, as you mentioned, you could have individuals that might go against their class. Anything else people want to comment on this?
Um, I think it's good. Like Mao had a chance to say something like the supporters of my socialist cause or the supporters of like a specific like the Chinese Communist Party. But he
Hmm.
didn't say that. He just said
Hmm.
the supporters of socialism in general, which
Hmm.
at that time was a relatively broad group of people. I
Hmm.
mean, some of the most important people to the revolution weren't even members of the party. They were members of the left wing of the Kuomintang, even if they weren't overt about it. Um,
Hmm.
so he kind of creates a broader sense for people who are just kind of ideologically aligned. maybe we don't all understand the same thing, but we all want the same thing.
Right. If there's something else, we can, who would like to read next?
So I'm willing to read stuff, but I'm coughing a lot and I've got a cough drop in my mouth. Is that going to be a problem?
It shouldn't, but if you need to stop, just let us know.
Okay. Is this the third paragraph of
Yes.
part one? You say yes?
Yep.
Okay. The contradictions between ourselves and the enemy are antagonistic contradictions. Within the ranks of the people, the contradictions among the working class are non-antagonistic, while those between the exploited and the exploiting classes have a non-antagonistic as well as an antagonistic aspect. There have always been contradictions among the people, but they're different in content in each period of the revolution and in the period of building socialism. In the conditions prevailing in China today, the contradictions among the people comprise the contradictions within the working class, the contradictions within the peasantry, the contradictions within the intelligentsia, the contradictions between the working class and the peasantry, the contradictions between the workers and peasants on the one hand, and the intellectuals on the other, the contradictions between the working class and other sections of the working people on the one hand, and the national bourgeoisie on the other, the contradictions within the national bourgeoisie and so on. Our people's government is one that genuinely represents the people's interests. It is a government that serves the people. Nevertheless, there are still certain contradictions between this government and the people. These include the contradictions between the interests of the state and the interests of the collective on the one hand, and the interests of the individual on the other, between democracy and centralism, between the leadership and the led, and the contradictions arising from the bureaucratic style of work of some of the state personnel in their relations with the masses. All these are also contradictions among the people. Generally speaking, the fundamental identity of the people's interests underlies the contradictions among the people. Are we doing like a paragraph or two at a time, or
Yeah,
should I do another one?
go for it.
All right. That one sentence was wow. I'm like, am I reading this right? Am I rereading the same thing? Jeez. In our country, the contradiction between the working class and the national bourgeoisie comes under the category of contradictions among the people. By and large, the class struggle between the two is a class struggle within the ranks of the people, because the Chinese national bourgeoisie has a dual character. In the period of the bourgeois democratic revolution, it had both a revolutionary and a conciliationist side to its character. In the period of the socialist revolution, exploitation of the working class for profit constitutes one side of the character of the national bourgeoisie, while its support of the Constitution and its willingness to accept socialist transformation constitute the other. The national bourgeoisie differs from the imperialists, the landlords, and the bureaucrat capitalists. The contradiction between the national bourgeoisie and the working class is one between exploiter and exploited, and is by nature antagonistic. But in the concrete conditions of China, this antagonistic contradiction between the two classes, if properly handled, can be transformed into a non-antagonistic one and be resolved by peaceful methods. However, the contradiction between the working class and the national bourgeoisie will change into a contradiction between ourselves and the enemy if we do not handle it properly and do not follow the policy of uniting with, criticizing, and educating the national bourgeoisie, or if the national bourgeoisie does not accept this policy of ours. All right, I'm done.
All right. I can pick up reading. Since they are different in nature, the contradictions between ourselves and the enemy, and the contradictions among the people must be resolved by different methods. To put it briefly, The former entail drawing a clear distinction between ourselves and the enemy, and the latter entail drawing a clear distinction between right and wrong. It is, of course, true that the distinction between ourselves and the enemy is also one of right and wrong. For example, the question of who is in the right, we are the domestic and foreign reactionaries, the imperialists, the federalists, and the bureaucrat capitalists, is also one of right and wrong, but it is in a different category from questions of right and wrong among the people. Our state is a people's democratic dictatorship led by the working class and based on the worker-peasant alliance. What is this dictatorship for? Its first function is internal, namely to suppress the reactionary classes and elements and those exploiters who resist the socialist revolution, to suppress those who try to wreck our socialist construction, or in other words, to resolve the contradictions between ourselves and the internal enemy. For instance, to arrest, to try and sentence certain counter-revolutionaries, and to deprive landlords and the bureaucrat capitalists of their right to vote and their freedom of speech for a certain period of time. All this comes within the scope of our dictatorship. To maintain public order and safeguard the interests of the people, it is necessary to exercise this dictatorship as well over thieves, swindlers, murderers, arsonists, criminal gangs, and other scoundrels who seriously disrupt public order. The second function of the dictatorship is to protect our country from subversion and possible aggression by external enemies. In such contingencies, it is the task of this dictatorship to resolve the contradiction between ourselves and the external enemy. The aim of the dictatorship is to protect all our people so that they can devote themselves to peaceful labor and make China a socialist country with modern industry, modern agriculture, and modern science and culture. Who is to exercise this dictatorship? Naturally, the working class and the entire people under its leadership. Dictatorship does not apply within the ranks of the people. The people cannot exercise dictatorship over themselves, nor must one section of the people oppress others. Lawbreakers among the people will be punished according to the law, but this is different in principle from the exercise of dictatorship, to suppress enemies of the people. What applies among the people is democratic centralism. Our Constitution lays it down that citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of speech, the press, assembly, association, procession, demonstration, religious belief, and so on. Our Constitution also provides that the organs of the state must practice democratic centralism, that they must rely on the masses, and that their personnel must serve the people. Our socialist democracy is the broadest kind of democracy, such as is not to be found in any bourgeois state. Our dictatorship is the people's dictatorship, the people's democratic dictatorship, led by the working class and based on the worker-peasant alliance. That is to say, democracy operates within the ranks of the people, while the working class, uniting with all others enjoying civil rights, in first place with the peasantry, enforces dictatorship over the reactionary classes and elements and all those who resist socialist transformation and oppose socialist construction. By civil rights, we mean politically the rights of freedom and democracy. But this freedom is freedom with leadership, and this democracy is democracy under centralized guidance, not anarchy. Anarchy does not accord with the interests or the wishes of the people. Certain people in our country were delighted by the Hungarian incident. They hoped that something similar would happen in China, that thousands upon thousands of people would take to the streets to demonstrate against the people's government. Their hopes ran counter to the interests of the masses, and therefore could not possibly win their support. Deceived by domestic and foreign counter-revolutionaries, a section of the people in Hungary made the mistake of resorting to violence against the people's government, with the result that both the state and the people suffered. The damage done to the country's economy in a few weeks of rioting will take a long time to repair. In our country, there were some others who wavered on the Hungarian incident because they were ignorant of the real state of affairs in the world. They think that there is too little freedom under our people's democracy, and that there is more freedom under Western parliamentary democracy. They ask for a two-party system in the West, as is in the West, with one party in office and the other in opposition. But this so-called two-party system is nothing but a device for maintaining the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. It can never guarantee freedoms to the working people. As a matter of fact, freedom and democracy exist not in the abstract, but only in the concrete. In a society where class struggle exists, If there is freedom from the exploiting classes to exploit the working people, there is no freedom for the working people not to be exploited. If there is democracy for the bourgeoisie, there is no democracy for the proletariat and other working people. The legal existence of the Communist Party is tolerated in some capitalist countries, but only to the extent that it does not endanger the fundamental interests of the bourgeoisie. It is not tolerated beyond that. Those who demand freedom and democracy in the abstract regard democracy as an end and not as a means. Democracy as such sometimes seems to be an end, but it is in fact only a means. Marxism teaches us that democracy is part of the superstructure and belongs to the realm of politics. That is to say, in the last analysis, it serves the economic base. The same is true of freedom. Both democracy and freedom are relative, not absolute, and they come into being and develop in specific historical conditions. Within the ranks of the people, democracy is correlative with centralism and freedom with democracy. They are the two opposites of a single entity, contradictory as well as united, and we should not one-sidedly emphasize one to the exclusion of the other. Within the ranks of the people, we cannot do without freedom, nor can we do without discipline. We cannot do without democracy, nor can we do without centralism. This unity of democracy and centralism, of freedom and discipline, constitutes our democratic centralism. Under this system, the people enjoy broad democracy and freedom, but at the same time, they have to keep within the bounds of socialist discipline. All this is well understood by the masses. In advocating freedom with leadership and democracy under centralized guidance, we in no way mean that coercive measures should be taken to settle ideological questions or questions involving the distinction between right and wrong among the people. All attempts to use administrative orders or coercive measures to settle ideological questions or questions of right and wrong are not only ineffective but harmful. We cannot abolish religion by administrative force, order, or force people not to believe in it. We cannot compel people to give up idealism any more than we can force them to embrace Marxism. The only way to settle questions of an ideological nature or controversial issues among the people is by the democratic method, the method of discussion, criticism, persuasion, and education, and not by the method of coercion or repression. To be able to carry on their production and studies effectively and to lead their lives in peace and order, the people want their government and those in charge of production and of cultural and educational organizations to issue appropriate administrative regulations of an obligatory nature. It is common sense that without them, the maintenance of public order would be impossible. Administrative regulations and the method of persuasion and education complement each other in resolving contradictions among the people. In fact, administrative regulations for the maintenance of public order must be accompanied by persuasion and education, for in many cases, regulations alone will not work. So I have another discussion question for everyone. What are the main differences between contradictions among the people and contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people? And it may make things easier to first describe the unique characteristics of contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people, then follow that up with describing the unique characteristics of contradictions among the people.
The way I'm trying to understand it is that contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people are conflicting interests, not because they only benefit the enemies of the people. It's essentially like how it's hard to describe almost. Within the people, it's things that aren't necessarily, oh, you should get less food, or oh, we should pay you less, or oh, you shouldn't have a house. That's what it is between people and the enemies of the people. Between people, it's things like, oh, I want to believe in this religion. I want to follow this thing. I want to say this thing. It's fundamentally different.
Right. Contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people are inherently antagonistic. Anything else? What I had for describing specifically the contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people are that it is antagonistic contradictions. Resolving them entails drawing a clear distinction between ourselves and the enemy. As with contradictions among the people, this is drawing a distinction between right and wrong, but it is a different category of right and wrong than those among the people. And resolving them requires the application of dictatorship over the enemies of the people and compulsion. So taking that, how does that compare to the unique characteristics of contradictions among the people?
I don't mean to dominate the conversation, but I guess contradictions among the people are, at least to me, something that's more abstract, less well defined, and more so isn't something that the state or the dictatorship of the people can limit or control or try to persuade. I mean, they're issues among the people, not of the people. They're not like that. It's like it's more complex. It's more convoluted, I think.
Well, Mao was describing the People's Democratic Dictatorship as the uh, of the people. So the state itself is of what Mao is defining as the people in this case, at least once it has been established and the bourgeois state has been eliminated. He's taking it step by step, comparing it to the contradictions between the people and the enemies of the people. Contradictions among the people are non-antagonistic among the working people. Elements of both antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradictions exist between the exploited and the exploiting classes. Resolving these contradictions entails drawing a clear distinction between right and wrong, and regulations alone will not solve these. And they must be dealt with using the democratic method of resolving contradictions among the people, as well as education. Any questions? Comments? All right. Who would like to read next?
I'll grab a couple more paragraphs. Okay. This democratic method of resolving contradictions among the people was epitomized in 1942 in the formula unity, criticism, unity. To elaborate, that means starting from the desire for unity, resolving contradictions through criticism or struggle, and arriving at a new unity on a new basis. In our experience, this is the correct method of resolving contradictions among the people. In 1942, we used it to resolve contradictions inside the Communist Party, namely the contradictions between the dogmatists and the great majority of the membership, and between dogmatism and Marxism. The left dogmatists had resorted to the method of ruthless struggle and merciless blows in inter-party struggle. It was the wrong method. In criticizing left dogmatism, we did not use this old method, but adopted a new one. That is, one of starting from the desire for unity, distinguishing between right and wrong through criticism or struggle, and arriving at a new unity on a new basis. This was the method used in the rectification movement of 1942. Within a few years, by the time the Chinese Communist Party held its 7th National Congress in 1945, unity was achieved throughout the party as anticipated, and consequently, the People's Revolution triumphed. Here, the essential thing is to start from the desire for unity. For without this desire for unity, the struggle, once begun, is certain to throw things into confusion and get out of hand. Wouldn't this be the same as ruthless struggle and merciless blows? And what party unity would there be left? It was precisely this experience that led us to the formula unity, criticism, unity. Or, in other words, learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones and cure the sickness to save the patient. We extended this method beyond our party. We applied it with great success in the anti-Japanese base areas in dealing with the relations between the leadership and the masses, between the army and the people, between officers and men, between the different units of the army, and between the different groups of cadres. The use of this method can be traced back to still earlier times in our party's history. Ever since 1927, when we built our revolutionary armed forces in base areas in the South, this method had been used to deal with the relations between the party and the masses, between the army and the people, between officers and men, and with other relations among the people. The only difference was that during the anti-Japanese war, we employed this method much more consciously. And since the liberation of the whole country, we have employed this same method of unity, criticism, unity in our relations with the democratic parties and with industrial and commercial circles. Our task now is to continue to extend and make still better use of this method throughout the ranks of the people. We want all our factories, cooperatives, shops, schools, offices, and people's organizations, in a word, all our 600 million people, to use it in resolving contradictions among themselves.
Okay. Describe the democratic method of resolving contradictions among the people. What does it entail? What is required for this to be done successfully?
Mao gives the formulation of unity, criticism, unity, which means everyone's starting from basically at least the same position of unity. So anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist, national liberationist, what have you. And then as these contradictions start to arise and people start to develop different expressions of the different ideologies and things start to come into conflict, that's where you have criticism, where it has to be good faith, it has to be principled, but everyone is free to criticize all the other positions, and the idea is that through that process, I guess for lack of a better term, the good ideas will prevail and the bad ideas will be weeded out, and then everyone can come together and reunify on this new understanding of the moment at hand, the ideology, what the correct line is, what the correct steps to take are, etc.
Yeah, that's like pretty much perfect. What I just had here is basically just that in other words: unity, criticism, unity. Begin from a place of desire for unity. Criticize using the method of learn from past mistakes to avoid future ones, and cure the sickness to save the patient, to determine what is right and wrong, and arrive at a new unity on a new basis. So what is required for this to be done successfully?
Everyone must be willing to cooperate, or not cooperate, but everyone must be willing to contribute under the guidance of the pre-established system. So there's kind of a majority contribution, but there's guidelines for those contributions. And one of the guidelines is as many people as possible should contribute.
Sure, yeah, that's definitely important.
I think he mentions also some sort of centralized leadership, not in the command sense, but just that as kind of like a judge and jury sense. Like it can't be just a complete free for all. There has to be structure to the criticism to keep everything on track and keep everything kind of moving through the process.
Sure. Sure, we should have democratic centralism to make sure that this criticism is done in the correct time and place. Uh, Mao does mention that something else is specifically required for criticism unity to be done successfully, though. Should I reveal it?
Sure.
Okay. It is essential to start from a genuine desire for unity. Without this, it would create confusion and the struggle would get out of hand. So, uh, we must be genuine in wanting to have unity, in the first place. That's the only way that our criticisms will be correct and genuine in good faith. Otherwise, it'll just turn into just basically attacking each other and trying to tear each other down.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that this sort of guideline is a great way to get out of the way of the democratic process, of the process of democratic centralism. People who are just there to agitate, or who are just there to be contrarians, or who are there to just question everything. Like, we should be questioning everything. Don't get me wrong. But people whose intention isn't inherently progress and unification and unity and stuff like that. But the people like in American society who just kind of do it for gits and shiggles, who enjoy spending their time wasting other people's time. It gets them out of the way. It solves, it doesn't solve, but it remedies that issue.
Sure. It, there's a question of how do we figure out who is being genuine and who is not. Um, but at least for ourselves, we should always make sure that we have that desire for unity in the first place, and then we can just kind of judge from people's reactions to our attempts at unity, whether they genuinely want unity or not. The biggest thing and the most important thing is our own desire for unity, though.
I think just on a practical interpersonal level, I mean, Mao doesn't mention this, but just thinking how this plays out in a large group, there needs to be a really, really healthy, outsized serving of or portion of humility. I think a lot of people, of all political persuasions, left, center, right, whatever, a lot of people let their egos kind of get in the way of things, and they feel like they have to be the one who is recognized as right, or they have ulterior motives, or contradicting an agenda, or whatever's going on. Very similar to what Francis was just saying of being contrarian, or just trying to be a troll about everything. But then also people who take criticism personally, or view debate as a way to, uh, you know, crush the opposition and to emerge victorious, like as a blood sport or something. That is anathema to actual group unity and process, and what Mao was talking about here of unity, criticism, unity.
Right.
Because as we've all said, it needs to come from a place of good faith. I think it also needs to come from a place of humility and keeping the eye on the prize of resolving the contradictions so that you can move on to the next one, so that you can make progress in the struggle and not just arguing for the sake of arguing.
Right. Yeah, when we go into a discussion, we need to make sure that we're not that we are going in the discussion willing to admit when we're wrong.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I'd also like to add that we have historical evidence to suggest that some of our most important revolutionaries have not worked for ulterior motives. Something that will often be spread, or a kind of misconception that's spread by the bourgeois or just by bourgeois sympathizers in general, is that they had ulterior motives. Like Mao just wanted power, or Stalin, same thing for Stalin, he just wanted power. We know not only from evidence within those systems, but from beyond them, that's not true. Declassified CIA documents prove, after Stalin died, they were declassified, that Stalin did not have absolute power. He did not have complete comprehensive influence, and that he was more like the captain of a team. Like the CIA itself was aware of that. And they even had another document that was probably declassified later that said the same thing about Mao, that they do not control everything, that they do not have absolute authority. They're like captains of a team. And I think, not to glaze the CIA, that's a great way to think of them.
Stalin also kept repeatedly begging to retire, and the party wouldn't let him.
This is true.
All right, anything else? All right, we can continue reading. Any volunteers?
I'll take a section.
All right.
In ordinary circumstances, contradictions among the people are not antagonistic. But if they are not handled properly, or if we relax our vigilance and lower our guard, antagonism may arise. In a socialist country, a development of this kind is usually only a localized or temporary phenomenon. The reason is that the system of exploitation of man by man has been abolished, and the interests of the people are fundamentally identical. The antagonistic actions which took place on a fairly wide scale during the Hungarian incident were the result of the operations of both domestic and foreign counter-revolutionary elements. This was a particular as well as a temporary phenomenon. It was a case of the reactionaries inside a socialist country, in league with the imperialists, attempting to achieve their conspiratorial aims by taking advantage of contradictions among the people to foment dissension and stir up order. The lesson of the Hungarian incident merits attention. Many people seem to think that the use of the democratic method to resolve contradictions among the people is something new. Actually, it is not. Marxists have always held that the cause of the proletariat must depend on the masses of the people, and that communists must use the democratic method of persuasion and education when working among the laboring people, and must on no account resort to commandism or coercion. The Chinese Communist Party faithfully adheres to this Marxist-Leninist principle. It has been our consistent view that under the people's democratic dictatorship, two different methods, one dictatorial and the other democratic, should be used to resolve the two types of contradictions which differ in nature, those between ourselves and the enemy, and those among the people. This idea has been explained again and again in many party documents and in speeches by many leading comrades of our party. In my article on the People's Democratic Dictatorship, written in 1949, I said, the combination of these two aspects, democracy for the people and dictatorship over the reactionaries, is the people's democratic dictatorship. I also pointed out that in order to settle problems within the ranks of the people, the method we employ is democratic. The method of persuasion, the method we employ is democratic. The method of persuasion, not of compulsion. Again, in addressing the second session of the First National Committee of the Political Consultative Conference on the 2nd of June, or on June 2, I said, the people's democratic dictatorship uses two methods. Towards the enemy, it uses the method of the dictatorship. That is, for as long a period of time as is necessary, it does not permit them to take part in political activity and compels them to obey the law of the people's government, to engage in labor and, through such labor, be transformed into new men. Towards the people, on the contrary, it uses the method of democracy and not of compulsion. That is, it must necessarily let them take part in political activity, and does not compel them to do this or that, but uses the method of democracy to educate and persuade. Such education is self-education for the people, and its basic method is criticism and self-criticism. Thus, on many occasions, we have discussed the use of the democratic method for resolving contradictions among the people. Furthermore, we have, in the main, applied it in our work, and many cadres and many other people are familiar with it in practice. Why then do some people now feel that it is a new issue? Because in the past, the struggle between ourselves and the enemy, both internal and external, was most acute, and contradictions among the people therefore did not attract as much attention as they do today. Quite a few people fail to make a clear distinction between these two different types of contradictions, those between ourselves and the enemy, and those among the people, and are prone to confuse the two. It must be admitted that it is sometimes quite easy to do so. We have had instances of such confusion in our work in the past. In the course of cleaning out counter-revolutionaries, good people were sometimes mistaken for bad, and such things still happen today. We are able to keep mistakes within bounds because it has been our policy to draw a sharp line between ourselves and the enemy and to rectify mistakes whenever discovered. All right. If someone wants to take over from there.
Any volunteers? All right, Francis?
Okay. Marxist philosophy holds that the law of the unity of opposites is the fundamental law of the universe. This law operates universally, whether in the natural world, in human society, or in man's thinking. Between the opposites, in a contradiction, there is at once unity and struggle, and it is this that impels things to move and change. Contradictions exist everywhere, but their nature differs in accordance with the different natures of different things. In any given thing, the unity of opposites is conditional, temporary, and transitory, and hence relative, whereas the struggle of opposites is absolute. Lenin gave a very clear exposition of this law. It has come to be understood by a growing number of people in our country. But for many people, it is one thing to accept this law and quite another to apply it in examining and dealing with problems. Many dare not openly admit that contradictions still exist among the people of our country, while it is precisely these contradictions that are pushing our society forward. Many do not admit that contradictions still exist in socialist society, with the result that they become irresolute and passive when confronted with social contradictions. They do not understand that socialist society grows more united and consolidated through the ceaseless process of correctly handling and resolving contradictions. For this reason, we need to explain things to our people and to our cadres in the first place, in order to help them understand the contradictions in socialist society and learn to use correct methods for handling them. Contradictions in socialist society are fundamentally different from those in the old societies, such as capitalist society. In capitalist society, contradictions find expression in acute antagonisms and conflicts, in sharp class struggle. They cannot be resolved by capitalist system itself and can only be resolved by socialist revolution. The case is quite different with contradictions in socialist society. On the contrary, they are not antagonistic and can be ceaselessly resolved by the socialist system itself. In socialist society, the basic contradictions are still those between the relations of production and the productive forces and between the superstructure and the economic base. However, they are fundamentally different in character and have different features from the contradictions between the relations of production and the productive forces and between the superstructure and the economic base in the old societies. The present social system of our country is far superior to that of the old days. If it were not so, the old system would not have been overthrown and the new system could not have been established. In saying that the socialist relations of production correspond better to the character of the productive forces than did the old relations of production, we mean that they allow the productive forces to develop at a speed unattainable in the old society, so that production can expand steadily and increasingly meet the constantly growing needs of the people. Under the rule of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism, the productive forces of the old China grew very slowly. For more than 50 years before liberation, China produced only a few tens of thousands of tons of steel a year, not counting the output of the northeastern provinces. If these provinces are included, the peak annual steel output amounted to a little over 900,000 tons. In 1949, the national steel output was a little over 100,000 tons. Yet now, a mere 7 years after the liberation of our country, steel output already exceeds 4 million tons. In the old China, there was hardly any machine building industry, to say nothing of the automobile and aircraft industries. Now we have all three. When the people overthrew the rule of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism, many were not clear as to which way China should head, towards capitalism or towards socialism. Facts have now provided the answer. Only socialism can save China. The socialist system has promoted the rapid development of the productive forces of our country, a fact even our enemies abroad have had to acknowledge. Does anybody else want to read?
I've done the least amount of reading, but also I feel like you're very excited about this. So if you want to take it, you can.
No, it's okay. It's a really long paragraph, so I'm gonna.
Okay,
I'm
okay, I can close it out then. But our socialist system has only just been set up. It is not yet fully established or fully consolidated. In joint state, private, industrial, and commercial enterprises, capitalists still get a fixed rate of interest on their capital. That is to say, exploitation still exists. So far as ownership is concerned, these enterprises are not yet completely socialist in nature. A number of our agricultural and handicraft producers, cooperatives, are still semi-socialist, while even in the fully socialist cooperatives, certain specific problems of ownership remain to be solved. Relations between production and exchange in accordance with socialist principles are being gradually established within and between all branches of our economy, and more appropriate forms are being sought. The problem of the proper relation of accumulation to consumption within each of the two sectors of the socialist economy, the one where the means of production are owned by the whole people, and the other where the means of production are owned by the collective, and the problem of the proper relation of accumulation to consumption between the two sectors themselves are complicated problems for which it is not easy to work out a perfectly rational solution all at once. To sum up, socialist relations of production have been established and are in correspondence with the growth of the productive forces. But these relations are still far from perfect, and this imperfection stands in contradiction to the growth of the productive forces. Apart from correspondence, as well as contradiction between the relations of production and the growth of the productive forces, there is correspondence as well as contradiction between the superstructure and the economic base. The superstructure, comprising the state system and laws of the people's democratic dictatorship and the socialist ideology guided by Marxism-Leninism, plays a positive role in facilitating the victory of socialist transformation and the socialist way of organizing labor. It is in correspondence with the socialist economic base, that is, with socialist relations of production. But the existence of bourgeois ideology, a certain bureaucratic style of work in our state organs, and defects in some of the links in our state institutions are in contradiction with the socialist economic base. We must continue to resolve all such contradictions in the light of our specific conditions. Of course, new problems will emerge as these contradictions are resolved, and further efforts will be required to resolve the new contradictions. For instance, a constant process of readjustment through state planning is needed to deal with the contradiction between production and the needs of society, which will long remain an objective reality. Every year, our country draws up an economic plan in order to establish a proper ratio between accumulation and consumption and achieve an equilibrium between production and needs. Equilibrium is nothing but a temporary relative unity of opposites. By the end of the year, this equilibrium, taken as a whole, is upset by the struggle of opposites. The unity undergoes a change. Equilibrium becomes disequilibrium. Unity becomes disunity, and once again, it is necessary to work out an equilibrium and a unity for the next year. Herein lies the superiority of our planned economy. As a matter of fact, this equilibrium, this unity, is partially upset every month or every quarter, and partial readjustments are called for. Sometimes contradictions arise and the equilibrium is upset because our subjective arrangements do not conform to objective reality. This is what we call making a mistake. The ceaseless emergence and ceaseless resolution of contradictions constitute the dialectical law of the development of things. Today, matters stand as follows. The large-scale, turbulent class struggles of the masses, characteristic of times of revolution, have in the main come to an end. But class struggle is by no means entirely over. While welcoming the new system, the masses are not yet quite accustomed to it. Government personnel are not sufficiently experienced and have to undertake further study and investigation of specific policies. In other words, time is needed for our socialist system to become established and consolidated, for the masses to become accustomed to the new system, and for government personnel to learn and acquire experience. It is therefore imperative for us at this juncture to raise the question of distinguishing contradictions among the people from those between ourselves and the enemy, as well as the question of the correct handling of contradictions among the people, in order to unite the people of all nationalities in our country for the new battle, the battle against nature, develop our economy and culture, help the whole nation to traverse this period of transition relatively smoothly, consolidate our new system, and build up our new state.
All right, thank you very much. Final thing, consider the following quotes from Mao's other work on contradiction. The universality or absoluteness of contradiction has a twofold meaning. One is that contradiction exists in the process of development of all things, and the other is in the process of development of each thing, a movement of opposites exists from beginning to end. Opposition and struggle between ideas of different kinds constantly occur within the party. This is a reflection within the party of contradictions between classes and between the new and old in society. If there was no contradiction in the party and no ideological struggles to resolve them, the party's life would come to an end. Thus, it is already clear that contradiction exists universally and in all processes, whether in the simple or in the complex forms of motion, whether in objective phenomena or ideological phenomena. The Deveron school does not understand that each and every difference already contains contradiction, and that difference itself is contradiction. Labor and capital have been in contradiction ever since the two classes came into being. Only at first the contradiction had not yet become intense. Even under the social conditions existing in the Soviet Union, there is a difference between workers and peasants, and this very difference is a contradiction. Although, unlike the contradiction between labor and capital, it will not become intensified into antagonism or assume the form of class struggle. The workers and peasants have established a firm alliance in the course of socialist construction and are gradually resolving this contradiction in the course of the advance from socialism to communism. The question is one of different kinds of contradiction, not the presence or absence of contradiction. Contradiction is universal and absolute. It is present in the process of development of all things and permeates every process from beginning to end. The fact is that no contradictory aspect can exist in isolation. Without its opposite aspect, each loses the condition for its existence. Just think, can any one contradictory aspect of a thing or of a concept in the human mind exist independently? Without life, there would be no death. Without death, there would be no life. Without above, there would be no below. Without below, there would be no above. Without misfortune, there would be no good fortune. Without good fortune, there would be no misfortune. Without facility, there would be no difficulty. Without difficulty, there would be no facility. Without landlords, there would be no tenant peasants. Without tenant peasants, there would be no landlords. Without the bourgeoisie, there would be no proletariat. Without the proletariat, there would be no bourgeoisie. Without imperialist oppression in nations, there would be no colonies or semi-colonies. Without colonies or semi-colonies, there would be no imperialist oppression of nations. It is so with all opposites. In given conditions, on the one hand, they are opposed to each other, and on the other, they are interconnected, interpenetrating, interpermeating, and interdependent. And this character is described as identity. In given conditions, all contradictory aspects possesses the character of non-identity and hence are described as being in contradiction. But they also possess the character of identity and hence are interconnected. This is what Lenin means when he says that dialectic studies how opposites can be identical. How then can they be identical? Because each is the condition for the other's existence. This is the first meaning of identity. Why is it that the human mind should take these opposites not as dead, rigid, but as living, conditional, mobile, transforming themselves into one another? Because that is just how things are in objective reality. The fact is that the unity or identity of opposites in objective things is not dead or rigid, but is living, conditional, mobile, temporary, and relative. In given conditions, every contradictory aspect transforms itself into its opposite. Reflected in man's thinking, this becomes the Marxist world outlook of materialist dialectics. It is only the reactionary ruling classes of the past and present, and the metaphysicians in their service, who regard opposites not as living, conditional, mobile, and transforming themselves into one another, but as dead and rigid. And they propagate this fallacy everywhere to delude the masses of the people, thus seeking to perpetuate their rule. The task of communists is to expose the fallacies of the reactionaries and the metaphysicians, to propagate the dialectics inherent in things, and so accelerate the transformation of things and achieve the goal of revolution. So the question is, why is it that contradictions still exist in socialist society? When will we have finally resolved all the contradictions in society?
Trick question. We never will.
Oh,
I was going to say by the year 3000. No, I mean, he says contradictions are inherent in the nature of things.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have day without night because the whole list can't have up without down, all those things. Because these things exist even in the abstract, if you think of what the definition of something is, usually some part of that definition is dependent on something else that is its opposite. Like we define things in relation to each other, not in vacuums.
Right.
Because these things all contain the contradictions within them, and that's what makes the world go round. It's literally what creates the, like if you think about a star, like if the fusion in the star and all of the elements coming together and the process in the core of the star is literally what makes the star a star. When that process ends, when all the fuel is used up, it is no longer a star and it literally dies. And that is what he's talking about here. If we ever get to a point where there are no contradictions, that's basically going to be the metaphysical equivalent of heat death of the universe. Like it just, as long as we are alive, that doesn't happen. It
Beautifully put.
I want to say also that last section where where he was talking about what was it? I'm sorry, could you go back just one screen? I forget exactly how we put it. It is only the reactionary ruling classes of the past and present, and the metaphysicians in their service to regard opposites not as living, but as dead and rigid. And they propagate the fallacy everywhere to delude the masses of the people, thus seeking to perpetuate their rule. So I think a lot of you guys here know this, but maybe some of you don't. I have a brother who is an objectivist. He is a pupil of the Ayn Rand School of Philosophy. And I have not read a lot of Rand. I've read some of it, but I am familiar that one of her metaphysical uh, tenets is that, A is A. It is this thing, and it is always this thing, and that is what makes it this thing. Um, and how reading this here, it just jumped out at me, how you could take Ayn Rand's kind of metaphysical conception of the world as exactly what Mao is talking about here. And of course, Rand is not the only one who does this, but just this idea of the static nature of the universe and of life, um, which of course promotes the idea that, well, class relations exist because they've always existed and they will always exist, and there's no way to move past them. And, then they try to extrapolate capitalism 3,000 years ago just to make it seem like, see, capitalism's always been around, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, that just jumped out at me right there.
Yeah, no, that's very good. I basically just have what you both have already covered. Contradictions still exist in socialist society because contradictions are inherent to everything. Without contradiction, there would be no identity, no movement, no development, no life. Without contradiction, there would just be sameness, stillness, and death. There will always be contradictions in society in some form or another. As Marxists, we do not pretend that societal development will stop and reach a perfect utopia, even with the development of a communist society. There will always be development and contradictions, but we will not yet know what contradictions will arise to the surface in communist society to be able to predict what might come after until we get there. Anything else on this?
I was going to say, I think that last point that you have there is really important because um, very often our critics and our detractors will point to how Marx and Engels failed to, define what socialism was going to be or what that society was going to look like, as if that is uh, some sort of discredit to them and their ideas.
Mm-hmm.
But they said this, and like you said here, you won't know until you get there. You it's like if you're going to walk into a forest and someone's going to ask you to, well, okay, I want you to perfectly draw out what the forest is going to look like exactly a mile into it. It's like, I can't do that until I get there. But I can imagine there's going to be trees and grass and probably some leaves on the ground and sunshine and maybe a deer. Because, like, it's a forest. That's what forests are. But I can't draw the scene
Right.
perfectly without actually getting there first.
Yeah. And you can like imagine and like that in that scenario, you can imagine you can like kind of get a general idea like by looking at it from a distance. Maybe there's a high point nearby that you could just take a look at it from. But like you won't know the details at all. You'll just have a very vague general picture of what's there. And then you also won't even be able to predict what's beyond that, beyond what you can see right now. Uh, you'll have to get further on to be able to look ahead further.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else? Any final thoughts on this section?
He cooked.
That he did, yeah.
I will say I've read hardly any Mao in my life. And after just this one section, I'm like, oh, this is some of the most accessible metaphysical writing I've ever come across in my life. Very simply and eloquently written, I think. So I think I might be a Maoist fan, or a fan of Mao's writing at least.
I know, Brian, you mentioned the very long sentence earlier. That is kind of a thing in Chinese. A lot of times in Chinese where in English we might put a period, in Chinese, a lot of the time you just put a comma. So when things are being translated uh, from Chinese, unless the translator like takes the liberty of breaking up sentences into smaller sentences, a lot of the time you'll end up with very long sentences.
My teacher told me run-on sentences are bad.
The Chinese language is a little bit different.
I think your teacher might have been Eurocentric.
I mean, also the Chinese language is like purely analytical, and for a European language, English is actually relatively analytical, but it is still not as analytical as Chinese. So with Chinese, you can actually get fairly dense information-wise, while also not having it be actually too long in practice. So it might have a lot of information in one sentence, but in Chinese it'll be a longer sentence, but not crazy. But then if you translate all that information out into English, it'll be a much longer sentence.
Yeah, the only other language, I mean, a few others, but the one that I know the best, obviously, is Russian. And Russian is similar to that in that grammatically there are like the endings to words change depending on what they're doing in a sentence. And so, based off of the ending, you can surmise the information because if it was referring to something else, the ending would be different. So, like, you don't necessarily have to say an entire sentence, whereas in English, you would because we don't have that. So, if you
Mhm.
want to know the full sense, you have to literally you have to like spell it out. So
Yeah.
I don't know how Mandarin or Cantonese
Also, I mean,
grammar works, but it's something similar.
yeah, most Chinese words are only 2 characters long. So
Sure. Okay.
that also helps, which translates into 2 syllables. So, all
Nice.
right, anything else on this section? All right. Thank you for watching this recording of our reading group, and thank you to everyone that attended. We hope you got something out of this. As mentioned, the first chapter is the longest section of the book by far, so future videos of the series won't be nearly as long. After this, we moved on to Chapter 2, the question of eliminating counter-revolutionaries, but that will be in a separate video. If you enjoyed this and you want to attend the reading group live, feel free to reach out to us via email at milwaukee@cpusa.org. DM us on any of our social media, or just come say hi to us in an event that we're at. See you in the next video.